Welcome to another PL Together Lounge Talk. I'm Adam Geller, founder and CEO of Athena, the video observation platform. Today, we're talking with Pedro Noguera. He's the Dean of the USC Rossier School of Education and also the author of a recent book called Excellence Through Equity with co-authors Alan Blankstein and Lorena Kelly. Pedro, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Adam.
So let's talk a little bit about maybe this is a little bit more in the theoretical space, but the importance of the idea of having a classroom and how classrooms help create change. Specifically, I'll get you to react to something you've said previously. You've said education is the best tool for imagining new possibilities for the future. What does that mean?
So I've been thinking a lot about this. If you think most of the problems facing the world can be thought of as problems of learning. And by that, I mean, we just haven't learned how to solve that problem yet, right? So think a big one, climate change. It's so many facets to that, but one part of it is, what do we do about waste? What do we do about all this plastic that we consume? Well, imagine if we decided to work with kids on coming up with alternatives to, single-use plastics, right? Kids already, a lot of kids now they're not bringing plastic bottles of water to school anymore. They're bringing thermoses. We say, well, how do we get more people to do that? So we eliminate plastic water. It's about posing questions to kids that get kids to think about big things and then apply what they're learning to solve problems. And I've seen this work, one of a guy named Charlie Schultz. He's a professor at the University of Illinois. He used to be a teacher in Chicago. And as a part of a civics class, he had his kids documenting some of the problems in their school. And they document everything from broken windows to water fountains that didn't work to rodents in the school. And they came up with this long list. And then they talked about what should be done. But when they finished the exercise, the kids said, we need to tell the school board about this. That wasn't part of his activity, but he went along with the kids and they did. And it became a major embarrassment to the school district. And then it became a big issue because the media got a hold of it. And the kids got a very, very powerful civics lesson in the course of, he wrote a book about it called Amazing Things Happened Along the Way. And it's just a reminder that when we challenge kids with problems that are meaningful, that matter to them, that affect their lives, and then we show them how education can help them to solve those problems, then education becomes, I think, that much more meaningful. For a lot of kids, one of the questions they keep asking themselves is, why do I need to learn this? Whatever it is that the teacher is trying to convey. And I think that that's not an unreasonable question. And that we should be prepared for it. We should think through in advance. What's the benefit of learning whatever it is we have to teach our kids? And help them to see the value and the utility of using knowledge and information to expand their horizons and solve problems in the world.
It's funny, as you were telling that, I was imagining responding with, oh, it answers the question of why do we need to learn this? Um, what I found interesting about hearing you define that, certainly there's a ton of great agency you're turning over to the students, not just as learners, but as drivers and definers of how the learning is going. But um, you described the value system not as something that was created by the teacher. It was the values of the students, and in some ways giving them, electricity to turn on the machine for their activism to see those changes come true in the world.
And not being afraid of letting empowering the kids as learners. Because when they're empowered, sometimes they'll take things in new directions that we hadn't anticipated.
So, I think I can imagine where the answer to this, kind of probing goes, but, in thinking about asking about value systems, I also wanted to kind of bring up that talking about the idea of establishing a value system in your classroom, for some people, they hear that phrase and they get nervous or uncomfortable because they think that maybe it's like you're being told to talk about something that's political in the classroom. So I guess make it explicit, because I've got an idea in my mind, but make it explicit why this idea of uh, using classrooms to create value systems is not some coded message for teachers to take politics into their classroom.
No, I mean, if you think about it, when kids are small, particularly in kindergarten, first grade, we actually grade them, give them feedback on, do they play well with others? Do they follow directions? You know, things that we know are really essential part of socialization. Well, that shouldn't stop in kindergarten. That we need to be very intentional about creating learning communities where kids learn how to work together, cooperate, how to work through conflicts, because they will sometimes have conflicts with each other, how to listen, how to debate respectfully and with evidence and with listening. Those are not, that's not teaching moral values, although it's not amoral either. It is teaching a person how to be a part of a larger community, which is what we need. You know, when we talk about education as the foundation for democracy, what we're really talking about is providing kids with the tools they need to be citizens. And part of those tools are, you know, if we can't engage in civil debate with each other, then democracy is in trouble. If we can't listen to each other, then we're in trouble. And all those are things you can learn in school, but you have to undergird it with some agreed upon ways of communication, that we're not going to put each other down just because we disagree. We're not going to talk over each other. We will listen. We will respectfully disagree. And the teacher needs to model that. So I think that that's an essential part of education. Always has been. This is not a new idea.
It's funny that you took us back to, the purpose of education, the informed citizenry idea. And I was also thinking about that as you were talking about this. And it's almost like you're adding on top of that this nuance, which is all of this education enables them, yes, to engage with their community, but it sounds like you're also saying to care to engage with their community. It's not just having the tools to engage, it's to care about engaging with the problems of their community and their country. And that's really the charge that you're offering to educators right now.
Absolutely. I think that one of the worst things, I heard Dolores Huerta, the famous farm worker organizer, said, she in a TED talk, she said recently, she said the biggest threat to our future is apathy. And it's the belief that we can't do anything about what's going on. So just every person for themselves. And I agree. I think that when we lapse into thinking there's nothing that can be done, and it's each person for themselves, civilization's in trouble if that's what we come to. We wrote a book called The Crisis of Connection. And it's all about, first of all, acknowledging what's allowed human beings as a species to survive is altruism. The fact that we do and have historically taken care of each other, taken care of the weak, taken care of the older ones, the children. But if we lose that, that sense of recognition that we need to take care of other people, then society is in trouble. And I think we're seeing the signs of it now. We see it during this pandemic. It's the most vulnerable members who have been at greatest risk of the disease and of falling through the safety net. And so we need to constantly remind people that we are in fact interdependent, and we need to work together to solve the problems that we face in the world.
Well, Pedro, before we go, I want to ask you our extra credit question. And that's a little bit outside, or maybe it's inside the zone of education. I don't want to tell you how to answer it, but the extra credit question is, what's something that's changed for you in your personal life that you hope will continue, even, roll the clock forward when life can get back to, pre-pandemic versions of normal?
Well, during the pandemic, I took on a new job. I went from being a professor to being a dean. And it's a very different role. I was explaining to my granddaughter, it's like moving from being a player to being a coach. right? If you to use a sports analogy, the coach doesn't play the game, but the coach has to have a strategy. The coach has to see how the players play together, and in order to hopefully win the game. And I think being a dean is a lot like that. You're working with others. You have to have a strategy, but you also have to work with people and get people to work together, because universities are often places where everybody's doing their own thing, and the value of being within a school or a department together gets lost because everybody's looking for their own recognition and rewards. So my challenge is figuring out, how do I get people to work together? How do I get them to adopt a vision of where we want to go, and have it be shared, not just be mine. So I'm enjoying that work so far, even though I don't get to meet people in person very much. It's all by Zoom, but I'm looking forward to seeing them in person.
A new role that you have plans to continue long after the pandemic. Well, Pedro, thank you so much for joining us to be part of PL Together. If you're just joining us and listening to this part of the conversation and wondering what we talked about before, or wondering who else I've talked to, head over to pltogether.org for the rest of this conversation, as well as many others. Pedro, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Adam.